Thank you for this opportunity for sharing some of my writings in this forum of the Family of the Heart. I am particularly thankful to Dr. Sehdev for making it possible and for sharing with you the genesis, the birth process of some of my writing. First, I wish to pay tribute to the Family of the Heart, both as a metaphor for humanity and as a symbol of hope. A great writer and an evolutionary scientist, Lauren Isley from the United States, once wrote that man is born of love, and he exists by reason of love more continuous than any other form of life. No creature in the world demands more love than man. No creature in the world is less adapted to survive without it. A family is the center of that love. But what is a family? In 1955, in the lingering shadows of the Cold War and the atomic explosions in Hiroshima and Nagasaki just a decade earlier, and of the gruesome war that had wrought death and destruction on millions of people all over the world, a remarkable exhibition of photographs was presented at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. The exhibition was called The Family of Man. The 553 photographs in this exhibition were chosen from 68 countries, from some 2 million pictures that were submitted. The black and white photographs represented remarkable glimpses of the human condition, of the human story, that were unmistakably rooted in the specific locale in Lahore or in Jakarta, in Mexico or Colombia, yet they were so subtly and poignantly universal. In the pain and joy of childhood, in the yearning for justice and peace, in the celebration of rain or snow, in the brutality of revenge of war, in the hope for mercy or forgiveness, one witnessed but only one human face reflected in 1,000 different faces. The poet Carl Sandburg, in his prologue to the exhibition, summed it well. He said, "There is only one man in the world, and his name is all men. There is only one woman in the world, and her name is all women. And there is only one child in the world, and the child's name is all children." The exhibition, as it traveled to all 6 continents, became cause to celebrate for certain new hope for the human spirit. More than 9 million people thronged to see it in every corner of the world. When published as a book, people everywhere bought it by the millions. I'm glad to tell you that a copy of my own, bought in 1973, remains one of my most cherished possessions. As a member of the Family of Man, and as a member of the Family of Heart, I wish to share with you briefly some of the stations on my own journey as a writer and as a human being. Perhaps some of these observations will ring true for you as well. The question I ask: does one's life unfold like a story, or like a poem, or like a film, or like a dream? Does life has any coherence? Does it make any sense? Does it have any meaning? Growing up in India, in the city of Patiala in Punjab, my first memory of myself is the obsessive fascination I had for Indian films. I loved the films. The films lifted me into a world that was far, far more real and grand than anything that lay right in front of my eyes. I did not look at the moon till I first saw it in Chaudhry Ka Chand. I heard the sound of no flowing river till I first heard it in Madhumati. The cinema where it all happened was called Fool Cinema. I flowered. 2 years ago, on a visit to India, When I drove by it in a bicycle rickshaw, I missed a heartbeat. Tears welled into my eyes. Here was the most exquisite temple of my dreams. Nothing has ever been so enchanting for me. For me, those glittering images that light created on the screen were intoxicating. Raj Kapoor and Dilip Kumar, Madhubala and Meena Kumari, music of Naushad and O.P. Nayyar, love lost and love regained, what a scintillating and mesmerizing world it was. Early in my youth, as dreams of my becoming a doctor or an engineer were being laid upon me by those who, with their life-crushing middle-class anxieties, always lay such dreams on the young, what I yearned most to become was not a doctor or an engineer or an officer in the corrupt Indian bureaucracy, but an usher in the full cinema.
Beautiful.
With my little flashlight, I imagined that I would show the new worshippers in this temple of dreams their wooden and rickety seats, from where they would be beamed into a wonderland of soaring love and heart-wrenching music.
Wonderful.
But far more importantly, in the process, I would always be stealing a glance of my favorite heroes and heroines on the screen and listen to their enchanting voices and songs again and again, day in and day out, early in the afternoon and late into night. What a rapturous life would that be, unimaginably more delightful than being a doctor and looking at the sick and the dying all day. For what? For money? What a petty, wretched thought. That was more than 4 decades ago. As you can see, I didn't become an usher. In fact, I doubt it if there are cinemas now where they have ushers. But that illusory dream world woven by light, more real than real as I see now, has never ceased to haunt me. I am still far more drawn to what light creates, even that light that is not visible to us, than the hard, solid, tangible world of the matter. As a teacher over many years, in many lands and in many places, and as a writer, perhaps I have continued to carry a flashlight in my hand, leading the young and not so young to a mysterious world that is woven by light, far more delicately and colorfully than anything woven by silk. I have come to believe that the light is the most primary and profound expression of the universe. Kabir said it, "Abli Allah noor paya, kudrati ke sab bande, ek noor se sab jag upja, kaun bhale aur kaun mande." From one light, all has come to be. Who's good? Who's bad? These are all illusions of your own mind.
Good.
I have come to believe that light is the most primary and profound expression of the universe. Why else, I ask, would there be so many stars in the universe? And why else would the universe be so empty? Almost all of it. Why? A year ago, as I was riding the metro in New Delhi, this question hit me with certain disquieting urgency. Here on the train were hundreds and thousands of men and women, so closely packed together like sardines in a can, with hardly any empty space between them. Yet many of them were talking on their mobile phones to someone perhaps 10 kilometers away, or 100, or 1,000. Talking, laughing, arguing, entreating, cajoling, threatening, making deals, offering sales, transmitting pictures, listening to news and music from far away. To my simple eye, it seemed magical. How is it, I wondered, that all that scarce but seemingly empty space between the bodies and around the ears is filled with so many messages, so much music, such a plethora of thoughts and entreaties, such a vast gallery of pictures and images, and much more, captured and transmitted by such a little instrument, so precariously squeezed between the fleshy, sweaty bodies of the huddling masses, without colliding into each other. And there are some other messages that lie hidden in that vast empty space we call the universe, I wondered. Who may be sending these messages and why? On what wings of light do they ride? What kind of instrument must I have to receive them? In early 17th century, as the grand German mathematician and astronomer Johannes Kepler was formulating laws about the movement of the planets, he talked about the music of the universe. He saw musical harmonies in the planetary laws of movement. He was certain that the creator was a musician. I had no idea that I would be asking such disconcerting or perhaps futile questions on an underground train in India, squeezed between two heavy-set men, but perhaps the question had been germinating in my mind for many years. They may have started in the Fool cinema in Patiala some years earlier. But now that question brought me, at the age of 21, to the University of Toronto, where I came to study nuclear physics. To be more precise, I chose to study radiation physics at the Ontario Cancer Institute at the Princess Margaret Hospital, now surrounded not by beautiful and glamorous images of cinema of my youth, but by the cancer-afflicted patients and the dying. It was a long way from the dream of becoming an usher in the cinema to learning to cure cancer with the use of certain radiations. From the visible spectrum to the invisible devastating radiations, as though light was expressing itself in 1,000 different and exquisite ways, unfolding its secrets and revealing its many different faces. But before I could learn any of the powers of the devastating radiation of cobalt-60, merely 10 days after my arrival in this new world, at the age of 21, on a quiet, sunny autumn afternoon, in a small rented room on Sussex Avenue, on a cheap gramophone, in the company of strangers, I discovered some new radiations. Coming from the room next door, I heard music, the like of which I had never heard before. Within a few minutes, it beamed me to such enthralling places I didn't even know existed on this planet. As a student of physics, I knew well, to the last decimal, how the moon, 250,000 miles away, can cause ebb and tide here on Earth. But I had no idea how certain sound waves can reveal heaven here on Earth. When the music stopped, I rushed next door. "What were you playing?" I asked the stranger incredulously. "Don't you know? This is Beethoven's 9th Symphony." I didn't know. No, I didn't know. But it opened a new door for me, to a new beautiful hall of sumptuous and novel delicacies. In a moment, I felt convinced that without music and without poetry, science can show only a very veiled face of the universe. Listening to that grand music of Beethoven, his 9th Symphony, I asked them, as I still do, are there some symphonies being played out in the universe which I have never heard before? How do I prepare myself to hear them? Some years ago, in 2001, in the beautiful city of Shiraz in Persia, in Iran, quite unexpectedly, I felt as though I heard some notes of that cosmic symphony. A young woman, all clothed in black, kneeled before the shrine of poet Hafiz. She recited some poems, and then she cried and cried and cried. It was a sight to behold. What would life be, I wondered, without the sense of the ephemeral and the unknowable, without questions with no answers, without empty spaces with no messages? A few months later, I was to hear some notes of that same symphony again, this time in Paris, before the grave of the 19th century poet Charles Baudelaire. A young woman came and placed flowers on his gravestone, recited some verses, and cried her heart out. When the heart aches without knowing why, when it rejoices without any rhyme or reason, when sorrow comes without a shade of darkness, when happiness just drifts by like an autumn cloud, when music shoots forth from nowhere and words assume a mythopoeic reference, perhaps then the symphony of the universe is playing its notes.
Beautiful.
Wonderful. On life's journey, where does one stop and say, this is the last note, the last song, the last symphony? How does one know what is flickering on the screen is an illusion or it is real? I have asked this question in one way or another in all my books. This is not a private question. When we share a question, it touches upon all our culture. It brushes with the universal. For instance, once in the mountains of Thailand, after a heavy rain, surrounded by soaring hills, bathed in radiant light, I saw a rather ugly-looking worm crawl out of mud and then suddenly disappear into a crevice. Why would God create such an ugly thing? I blurted out to my friend, what could possibly be its purpose on the earth? Before I could find some footing on my intellectual hubris, my friend retorted, perhaps that worm is asking the same question about us. What is the purpose on earth of this creature called man? The great Danish writer, Karen Blixen, author of Out of Africa and other fine works, was once asked by a budding writer how to find one's tongue, some inspiration to create. Blixen suggested, write as though you owe an answer to God. When we owe an answer to a friend for some betrayal, to a beloved for certain heedlessness, to one's children for crushing their dreams, to the universe at large for a harsh and ignorant judgment, perhaps the seeds of artistic creation are laid. Today's my book, Hows and Whys of an Unexpected Universe, is an answer to that question that I had so wantonly raised in the mountains of Thailand about an ugly-looking worm. It is my attempt to find a gentle and harmonious place for myself and for man in the universe. In crowded trains, in the shrines and graveyards, in bookstores and isolated alleys, one can see illuminating images that are even more enchanting than the images in the cinema that so captivated me in my adolescence.